Hey guys, Savage here. This is gonna be a unscripted video. Well, most of mine are, but this one's a little different. And this video was very much inspired by a user named Cool Duda. The guy who does the DVD collection updates and also used to do the Don and Murph show, which he's a cool guy. I would recommend him. So as most of you know, I'm really, really into movies. I am a movie collector. I'm a training filmmaker. I'm a film critic, as you've seen multiple times with the Movie Nut series. And, like most cineasts, I have a couple of odd, quirky stories to tell about movies that I've seen and things that have happened because of them, or around them, or due to them. And I felt that I'd share a couple with you. Now, if I told you all of them, we'd probably be here till next year. So I decided to pick a couple that I felt were the most interesting, or the ones that I felt, merit the attention, even if the films themselves are either not particularly good or just things you probably never heard of. So this is just me sharing a few quirky stories. The first one up on the list is The Shadow. Now, you've probably heard me talk about this film, and more specifically the character, a dozen times over by now. I mean, hell, I even use The Shadow as my avatar for my commentaries. But the thing about the film was, this was very much a right out of the sky kind of moment. Like, it fell out of the sky, because I was at Virgin when it was still called Virgin Stores, before they became Zavi, and later before they just went completely bankrupt and just did online operations. I remember going in there. I think I was like 11, 12 years old, and me and my brother were just scouring around the DVD section looking for something interesting. I'm trying to recall. I think he may have bought Jarhead that day. I could be wrong. I was looking over the aisles, and I happened to notice this was like, I'm trying to remember if it was like £6, £7, maybe £8, but I just saw it and I was like, hey, bro, come and look at this, and when he looked at it, he was like, you don't want to see that, it's not that great, and he had seen it a long time ago, and I asked him, well, why not, and he was like, yeah, it's not what, I don't think you'd like it, but I said, it looks cool. The poster art looks interesting with the metallic face and the eyes. That looked really interesting, and it had Alec Baldwin, who's an actor that I do like in it. And I just and from reading the back of it, it being set in the 1930s, and it looked like it was going to combine superheroes and mysticism, fantasy type movies. I thought I'll give it a watch, so I picked it up, and I watched it, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really fall in love with the movie until about a year later, when I popped it in again, and I really, really liked it even more that time around. And I decided to quickly look up on Wikipedia about the film's history, and that's when I stumbled across the character himself, the Shadow, and I began to read up on his history. I found out about the radio shows, the pulp novels, the comics, and from there, basically, my interest exploded, and I began to collect pulp novels, the two packs, the two stories, reprinted from Nostalgia Ventures, and I began to, listen to the radio show, which I could find on the internet through podcasts and things, and of course the comics, which I picked up from my comic shop, which is, I believe, based in Texas, and I managed to get them to ship stuff over to me. And really, this movie just really, I've talked about it, it's a good popcorn film, it's not the greatest thing ever, but it's a lot of fun, and I've liked this film for the longest time. And the thing is, when I think of my teenage years, my secondary school, I always think of this movie. This movie was one of those things that defined that time for me. And it's also directed by the Russell Mulcahy, who, as you know, did Highlander, which I watched about a year ago, and I thought was quite a good movie. Sadly, he's not done a lot of really great things. I mean, he did Lost Battalion and Resident Evil Extinction, which I don't think anything needs to be said about that film. But for the most part, he does TV miniseries, and it's very sad that his career has really slumped, because, he was an okay director. The music video style of editing, did give his movies good pacing and some really interesting ways of shooting action scenes. So just sad that he never really got another big break, and his career just continued to decline. Next up is Cromwell. Now, this is a movie that you've heard me talk about to death. I adore this film, with Richard Harris and Alec Guinness, and it's directed by Ken Hughes. I'm trying to think of what else he's done. There's a couple of other movies that you might have heard of that he's done, and I'm really not, I haven't seen that many of them, and for some reason I always confused him with John Hughes. I don't know why, because John Hughes is a completely different director. But the thing about this is that when I picked it up, again, much like The Shadow, it was one of those fell out of the sky moments. I was in Peacock's, my American viewers probably don't know who that is, but for those of you who are Brits, you probably know full well who Peacocks are. They were the Primark before Primark really became dominant. They were the store where you could get reduced clothing. And basically, they used to have, in the early 2000s, they had a bargain bin of DVDs and VHS tapes. And I remember there being a few in there that were interesting. They had Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in there, which, as I recall, had a very different cover. It was the one with the creature on the table thing, the thing that he is hoisted up, covered over with a sheet. And for some reason, I remember it being a greenish tint instead of blue. I don't know what that's about, and they had a Carry On film. I believe it's the one where they were doing Henry VIII, they were spoofing a lot of the big historicals that were coming out that time. Carry On Henry or something, Carry On Tudor. I really don't remember what it's called. And it looked interesting. And I happened to come across Cromwell there. It was a VHS tape there. It was about, I believe, £5-6. Probably a bit more, because it was when VHS was still being sold in stores. And I thought to myself, it looks interesting. When I got my mum to buy it, I popped it in, and I've never looked back since then. I just adore this film. It is, and I even rebought it on DVD about a year or two ago, because I just love this film that much. It's one of those movies that really set ideals in my mind, like how I should do filmmaking. The movie I'm talking about next is the one that really sparked my interest, but this is the film that really took it to another level. It was in this film that I began to appreciate much higher kinds of movies, because up until then, like most kids, I was more into cartoons and silly comedy movies. I wasn't really that much into historicals, but this just really turned that around, and I can quote entire passages from this film. It is that good. And and one thing else is that on the back of the tape, and I'm pretty sure you can find the picture online, when King Charles is sitting on the throne, you notice he's wearing his coat halfway, like he slung it over his shoulders, and it's covering the left side of his body. I do that, whenever it's too hot, when I'm inside a really stuffy corridor, I always sling my coat on like that. I always sling it over my side, just like Charles I does in the movie, and it's just one of those mannerisms I picked up, and it came from this movie, and really, there's not much else to say. As I've said before, check it out if you can find it. Really worthwhile. Richard Harris, Alec Guinness, you can't go wrong. The next one I want to talk about is Batman Returns, and as I just said, this is a movie that just really got me going. I had seen plenty of good films before then, mainly Disney ones, because like most kids, I had a huge Disney classics collection, Lion King, Aladdin, Robin Hood, Snow White, Pinocchio, Fox and the Hound, Lady and the Tramp. I had Dumbo. In fact, I had 2 tapes of Dumbo because someone I believe, bought me an extra one for my birthday, and they didn't know I already had it. 101 Dalmatians, and Oliver and Company, which I always liked as a kid. I'm well aware it's not one of Disney's greatest, but I always enjoyed it as a kid. And obviously they really, they inspired me, and I thought, wow, this looks really great. I want to do this when I'm older. But it was really Batman Returns that really cemented that for me. Now, I'm well aware this does not get the best reviews, and I'm well aware that I myself did not give it that great of a review when I did the Movie Nut Christmas special on this. But as I said in that review, in my heart of hearts, I would give this a silver star. But I had to give it a bronze star because, yes, I admit the storyline is a little muddled. Yes, Catwoman's, character arc is a bit bizarre. And yes, Batman does kill people, which is something that really he's not supposed to do. But, in all honesty, I love this film. I love it even more than Batman 89. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Batman 89. I do enjoy it, but this is the Batman film I grew up with. This and Batman Forever. these two were just utterly inspiring to me, especially Returns. I don't know what it was. I've always liked Danny DeVito. I think he's a really good actor and comedian, and I just always enjoyed him in movies. And I think he did a terrific job as the Penguin. I'm well aware that people say that Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, is, the real villain of the piece, and he is. And Chris does do his usual great here. I mean, it's Christopher Walken. How can you not like the guy? But just really inspiring. The music here I felt was perhaps my favorite of all the Batman soundtracks. It has a very twisted fairground kind of theme which fits with Penguin's backstory as a freak, and I liked the sequence where the Batmobile splits off the sides and it becomes like one of those old speed cars, one of those really old thin speed cars, and I just love the design. I love the Christmas theme. I love the way that the city looks and it's shot. And I just think this is an absolutely terrific movie. It's my favorite of the Batman films, and it's the one I grew up with. And it's something that really got me into filmmaking. It made me say, I want to do this. I want to learn how to shoot this way. I want to learn how to make these kinds of effects. It really got my interest going. So even though I had seen plenty of movies before then, it was Batman Returns that really got the machine going for me. The machine of just wanting to make movies and be involved with that. And frankly, I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said. And I know a lot of people already have views on this film, so let's just move on to the last bit. And this is perhaps the strangest and most interesting of the stories. 102 Dalmatians. Now, how do I explain this? I have seen the original, the 1961 animated version. As I said, it is very good. It's a very good film. And I believe it's one of the last that Disney made when he was still alive, when Walt himself was still alive. And the final sequence where between the lorry and Cruella's car, that chase sequence where she's trying to ram them off the cliff, I always was always on the edge of my seat when that was on as a kid. But when they remade it in 1996, I did not see it. I was only 3 when it came out, and I would not have been able to see it. And I actually never saw it. Well, to be honest, I never saw it properly. Like, one time I was going to sit down and watch it because my cousin had the tape of it, and I was going to sit down and watch it, but then we had to be called off to some birthday party or some kind of other thing, and I never got to properly sit down and watch it. 102 Dalmatians, though, I actually saw when it was new in the theaters in 2000, and and I enjoyed it as a kid. I laughed. I was with my cousin, the same one who had the tape of the first one. I was with my brother and I was with my godfather, and it was during Christmas that they released it, and if as I said, I liked it as a kid, but if I watched it today, I would probably have the same reaction I did when I watched Inspector Gadget. I would be like, I like this? I liked this? Just that kind of reaction, and the thing that's really interesting about it is the fact that the reason I remember this movie more than the movie itself is cherry pie. That's right, cherry pie. Or more specifically, McDonald's limited edition Christmas cherry pie that they had going on as a tie-in to the movie. And you're probably saying, wait a minute, what the hell does cherry pie have to do with 102 Dalmatians, or 101 Dalmatians for that matter? Well, I guess they thought that by putting it in a polka dot sleeve, black and white, just like the Dalmatian spots, it was obviously relevant. I really don't understand what cherries and dogs have to do with each other, but whatever. And the thing is, I remember, that clearly, just on the McDonald's posters that were sponsoring the movie when they had all the toys. I remember underneath those toys they would always say, "Oh yeah, exclusive offer, limited time only, cherry pie for, $1.49, I believe. $1.49 and $1.99. I'm sure that if you were growing up then, if you remember that, you probably remember that better than I can. But I just remember the cherry pie that McDonald's did to sponsor this movie. They did toys, and I think I probably gave all of them to my cousin because, it was mainly dogs, and let's face it, I'm probably, as a normal boy of that age I probably wasn't very interested in cute little dogs. But the cherry pie, I remember eating 4 or 5 times and loving it. And it's never come back since then. Maybe in America they've done it more times, But here we've never gotten the McDonald's cherry pie again after the release of 102 Dalmatians. And I always remember that movie for the cherry pie. In fact, I believe I went to McDonald's right after we saw the movie with my cousin, godfather, and brother, and we actually went to McDonald's and I actually bought cherry pie, and I think that was the third or fourth time I had done it. You know, I don't know. It's like it's one of those weird things where you remember something from the merchandise more than the movie itself. I mean, that's just very odd, but you know, it's one of those weird stories. You know, and I saw the original movie, 101 Dalmatians, the remake, I should say, with Glenn Close, the first one, you know, in a charity shop, and I may pick it up at some point and do a review of it, but that remains to be seen. And the other thing is that this very much represents the end of an era. It represents what I call the Disney popcorn comedy era. What I mean by that is that Disney used to make these comedies in the 90s that would get promotions that, like McDonald's, where they would give you toys and things. Like with Flubber, you got a bunch of toys. When they did Inspector Gadget, I remember that you could collect the different pieces and form like one big Inspector Gadget action figure. The original 101 would probably have had merchandising well, the original, I mean the remake, but Disney do not make films like this anymore. They just don't. They don't make these, you know, these like big family comedies and have toys based on them. Like, they don't do that anymore. I mean, you know, ever since Pirates of the Caribbean, they've really focused on fantasy and action movies, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it just makes you realize how much things have changed since then. And well, I just wanted to share those stories with you, so, you know, hope you enjoyed them. And, you know, if you've got your own weird little stories about movies and little odd things you remember about them, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And, well, I'll see you around, folks.
Surprise!